Well, welcome everybody. This is Scott Hughes. I am the Construction Design Manager for National Gypsum, and I cover the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic area. Joining me today is Frank Fuller. He is our Construction Design Manager for the Southwest. Along with Frank and the rest of National Gypsum team, we want to welcome you to the Understanding the UL Fire Resistant Directory 101 webinar. All of us here at National Gypsum really appreciate you all spending the next hour with us, so thank you for your time. Few quick housekeeping items before we jump in. Since we have such a great turnout for this webinar, all attendees are in listen-only mode. Please feel free to use the Q&A to submit your questions. Several folks will be monitoring questions as they come in. If we run out of time and don't get to all your questions, we will answer them via email. AIA credits will be submitted on your behalf if you included your AIA number at registration. And then certificates of participation will be sent to all attendees. So with that, let's jump into our topic of UL. Today's course is 1 credit. It is a health, safety, and welfare credit. And of course, the program is approved by AIA. So our programs are copyrighted. We ask that nobody records and distributes on their own. And here's the agenda for today. What we're going to do, we're going to start out by looking at the website. UL has stopped printing the books, so our most up-to-date information is going to be on the website. So we're going to take a good few minutes and actually show you how to find a specific UL design. We're going to look for a wall assembly, assuming we're not quite sure which one we need. So I'm going to spend a few minutes doing that. Then we're going to jump into the 3 volumes of the UL directory. We'll talk about each one briefly, and we'll really focus on volume number 1. We want to show you the Astm E119 fire test. We have a video of that. It's pretty cool. I think you're going to enjoy seeing what manufacturers' products go through in order for us to get our fire ratings via UL. The first 10 pages of volume 1 is where all of the, what I like to call cliff notes are, or all the things that we can do to UL designs to kind of beef them up, make them bigger, better, stronger. So we're going to show you some of that, not all of it, but we're going to highlight some things for you. We'll talk about the fire resistant properties of gypsum, and that's where calcination comes into play. So we'll define all of that for you. A lot of moisture in drywall. So that's really what makes it perform so well in a fire. And we'll show you some video of that as well. And then we're going to walk you through 3 designs. That sounds like a lot, but we'll do it quickly. But we want to point out things that whether we're an architect, a building official, or a contractor, or a salesperson, things that we need to know about specific designs. So we'll show you that. And then we'll wrap up today with the most often questions we get in our technical department that are related to fire. And it'll be a really good recap of what we go through today. So with that, let's start with who UL is. Obviously, our program's about UL, so we want to start with them. They are for-profit. They used to be not-for-profit, but they are now for-profit. And a fire design test can cost anywhere from just $10,000 to over $100,000 for manufacturers to test their stuff and to test their different assemblies. It just depends on how complicated we're getting, particularly some of those floor ceiling assemblies and roof ceiling assemblies can get expensive. So they are for profit. If you can't find it in UL, it just means nobody paid the test to have it done. It's simply how we do that. So they do a lot of things. They're a huge company. For what we do for a living, we're only concerned with the fire designs, but they do a lot of other stuff. Product safety testing. There are UL labels on products everywhere, right? So they're all over the world, and you can see how many manufacturers have actually produced UL certified products. So big deal, big company. It's important to note though that they're not the only game in town. There are several independent labs throughout the country that will do the Astm E119 fire testing and come up with some fire designs, and they are code approved. Those can be found in the GA600. So that is the real name for that book is the Fire Resistance and Sound Control Design Manual. It is published by the Gypsum Association. If you go to their website, gypsum.org, you get a lot of free stuff. Now, the GA600 is not free, but there's a lot of free stuff there that you can find. And this GA600 is a great resource for you if you don't have one. The latest edition is the 22nd edition, and it covers all of the gypsum manufacturers' designs. So you've got UL stuff in there and a bunch of the independent stuff that UL doesn't have. So I encourage you all to make that purchase. Okay, back to UL. So the website, super easy to remember, ul.com. Two things we want to show you here is UL actually encourages us to download anything we want from their website. There's no fees or anything like that for it, but they do want these 2 bullet points covered. So if you're going to download something, you can't manipulate it, use clip art to adjust things. It's got to be in its original format, and then you can reprint it right in your construction documents. And then the bullet point number 2, I won't read you the slide, but you have to have that sentence somewhere as well, just giving credit that this is a UL thing that you've reproduced. So with that out of the way, with ul.com, again, super large website. They do a ton of stuff. And what we're going to focus on is just spending a couple minutes finding a wall assembly with gypsum board and metal studs. And I'm not positive which one I want. If you know, for example, that you want to do U465, a very commonly specified wall, just Google it, Bing it, Firefox it, whatever. It'll come up very quickly that way. But let's assume you don't know. So we're going to use the UL website. So again, www.ul.com. And this is the home page. Now, I think it changes occasionally, but this is basically what the home page looks like. And when you scroll down to the very bottom of this home page, you're going to find a link to the Product IQ. This Product IQ is the database where the fire designs are now kept by UL. They did that about a year ago. So they've closed all the old stuff is gone. Now everything is in this Product IQ. They've done major updates to this website just the first quarter of this year. So it's significantly different if anybody here hasn't been on it for a while. We click that Product IQ link. And here we have to do it one more time. So we're going to access the Product IQ. What's not caught in my screenshot there is just what the Product IQ is. It kind of defines how they put things together. But you click that link again. And now for the first timers, you do have to register, at least as of now, you have to register. Rumors are that they're not going to make you register in the future, but we're going to assume for now that you still do. All it is your email and a password. I registered a long time back and I've never had to sign in. When I hit the login button, it just takes me right in. So it must remember the cookies on your computer, and it just allows you to go in without trying to remember what another password is. So we'll go ahead and click login. And here's the search page for the Product IQ section for the fire design. So we're just getting this massive website smaller and smaller, getting to the right file cabinet of it. And a couple things you can do. You can actually type in a search there at the big bar right there in the middle. Or if you're not sure what you're looking for, then we're going to actually go to the UL Architectural Services link. This link is clicked. And now we just made this website even smaller. We're getting closer to what we need. And we're going to actually, the big arrow there is pointing right at find walls, floors, roofs, beams, and columns. But before I click, I want you to just see there's other things you can do here. If you're looking for products that have documentation for sustainability, maybe go to the UL spot, right? There's a whole database there. Other AIA continuing education courses, there's a link for it here. So I encourage you to spend a few minutes playing around with this website, because there's a lot of things we can't possibly cover today that you can do with the website that would be advantageous to your job. So again, encourage you, play around and see what's there. So back to trying to find our wall assembly, we're going to go ahead and click Find Walls. And here's what's really new is how you search for it. So this is kind of cool. What they've done is they put the search criteria on the left, and all the results are going to pop up to the right, and you don't have to go back and forth between screens. So they've really streamlined it very nicely. So my next slide is going to show you a filled out search criteria there. And upper left corner, you see the design number. That first thing, it's blank. If you know it, you could put it there, but by now you have Googled it and have already found it, right? So it's not the most efficient way to do it if you know what you're looking for. Right below that is the fire rated design details and assembly types. When you click inside that box, all of the options come up. I chose walls and partitions. And then when you click in protection type, all the different things and options come up. I chose metal studs, gypsum board, lath, and or plaster. I'm going to skip company name and additional filter right for this second. We'll jump right back to it. And then we went to hourly rating, and I chose a 1 hour. So you got all the different hourly ratings that are out there. You choose what you want. Just below the hourly rating, though, you will see STC rating. That is so that if you're looking for a hourly rated wall assembly that has a minimum STC of something, plug that number in and you won't get all the results that don't apply. So it really streamlines everything that pops up. So kind of a cool feature they've added. Back up to company name and additional filter. Let's assume you have no idea what you're looking for other than the fact that you're trying to find a design with a certain company. You can put a name in there and all of the designs they have will pop up in a link. There's a link that you click and you can go and see all the designs they have. I do not encourage you to do that with a gypsum manufacturer. You're going to get way too many hits, right? But maybe there's products out there that are a little bit more unique that won't have so many designs, and that's a quick way to find out what they have. So anyway, right below my screenshot, you can't see it, but there's a search button. We click that search button, and once we've done, all of the designs will pop up that meet the criteria that we've specified. So here I scrolled down. They start at the very beginning. So let's assume there's a U001, right? So that would be at the very top. But I scrolled all the way down to get to U465. And we click on this link to bring us right into the design itself. But look at all the pictures to the right. As you scroll up and down, you can eliminate things very quickly and then kind of hone in on what you're trying to find. So it's really a great feature that UL has done. Clicking U465, here's our design. If you've got the books still in your office, most of us are in our homes, and I doubt any of us have UL directories in our homes, but if you're in the office and you have it and you're flipping the pages through, you get to the metal studs and you get to the gypsum board, and you get the 1 hour ratings. This is exactly what it looks like in the book. What I wanted to do though is show you the very top of this page because there's a couple key links. So this particular U465 and most designs are going to have that printer and that email icon up there. If you click the printer, you can obviously print it, or you can print it to PDF and then save it on your computer. Or you can click the email link, and that will email a link to this specific website, web page, to whomever you send it to. It does not send a PDF or the actual hard version. It's just a link. So that person's going to have to click the link, register if they're not registered, and then it'll pop up. So it's up to you how you handle that. If you'd rather print a PDF, send it off to a job site trailer through your company email, whatever works best for you. Big arrow at the bottom, see general information for fire resistant ratings. That's where all of our notes are. That's where the first 10 pages of volume 1 that we're going to highlight in a few minutes are found. But on the website, any UL design where those would pertain or apply, better word is apply, it's going to have that link. So you don't have to remember where that link is. It's going to be on every single design where they matter. Right below that, which is just outside of my screenshot there, there's a link for Canadian stuff. So if you do work in Canada, there is a separate link for that as well. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and click that link. And here is the table of contents for those first 10 pages of volume 1. I'll leave the screen up so you can kind of peruse and see what's there. Obviously, I'm a gypsum board manufacturer, so we're going to show you number 9 here in just a second. But there's a lot of other things here. We're going to highlight some of it, but I encourage you spend some time playing around on the website. Look at some of these things, particularly our architects and our building officials. There's things you can do and cannot do with UL designs, and they're pretty much, here's where you find a lot of the information. So there's things on control joints in here, radiant, heating, stuff that I'm not involved with, but you all certainly would be. So again, check it out when you've got a few extra minutes. It is quite interesting, believe it or not. So we click the link, gypsum board, and here are all the quote unquote cliff notes and things that we can and cannot do with gypsum board assemblies. I'm going to dig into this in a few minutes, so we won't do it now. I just wanted to show you that this is what you see. This is where those first 10 pages are found, particularly when we're all working at home without the directories in front of us.
All right, thank you, Scott. So once you get that UL rating, you may be asking yourself, how do they determine whether it's a 1 hour or 2 hour wall, that assembly? So it's based on Astm E119, based on hourly ratings. And what we're going to be taking a look at here in just a minute is a video of an actual test, so you get to see what a wall burn looks like. So the Astm E119 is used for 10 by 10 partitions, 14 by 18 floor and ceiling assemblies, and also a column test. What you're seeing here on the right side is an actual wall, vertical wall, installed partition getting ready for the test. If you will notice that the seams have been addressed with taping compound and tape, and the fasteners head have been addressed as well. So that board is ready to go. In addition, you will see the little squares with numbers on them. Those are thermocouples that have been strategically placed according to the ASTM test to measure the temperature of that board as it's being burned to see if it is burning through the core. There's also a thin top wire going across to measure deflection if this is a structure that has pressure attached to it. So let's go ahead and watch the video, and then we'll talk about some other things right after.
Today's test, one of many, is the Astm E119, used to measure the integrity of building assemblies and materials subjected to fire exposure. Because of tests like these and our NGC testing services facility, we produce innovative products that go above and beyond customers' expectations, so you can design or build structures that are ready for life and are protected from the unknown.
All right, so a lot of different things going on in that video that we're going to talk about at some point, but one of the first things that you saw is that was in front of the oven being burned off. It looked like smoke coming off, and that was actually steam, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. You'll also notice that the test was done in 2 phases. They burned the wall first, and then there was a hose test for penetration to see if that wall is going to hold up. ASTM test allows us to build 2 exact wall assemblies. The first one we can burn to see if it's going to pass that test for the full hour. The second assembly is just the same, and they're only going to burn it for half an hour and then do the hose pressure test to see if there's any penetration into the core. So ASTM allows us. In some cases, they will do both tests at the same time. So as we begin to look at this furnace, you'll see that after 5 minutes, that furnace has reached a temperature of 1,000 degrees. That's pretty hot. And as you continue that temperature curve, you're going to see that after an hour, inside of that oven is at 1,700 degrees. So that means that the inside of that wall assembly is going to be burning for an hour at 1,700 degrees. And there's a lot of things that go into determining whether this wall will pass or not. So very important that we make a note of those. So if you're looking here to the right is actually the wall cavity of the interior side of an assembly that was exposed to the flames. And you're seeing that the marks on there indicates the hose penetration test that they did. And so on the outside, if you remember those thermocouples that I pointed out to you, all of those thermocouples cannot exceed 250 degrees over ambient temperature. And if just one of those thermocouples reach 325 degrees over ambient temperature, it fails. If the hose ring test penetrates that core, it fails. If for some reason, as you will see in a minute, there's any evidence of burn through on the other side, that assembly has failed, and most of all, the structure cannot collapse. If any one of these things happens, that assembly has to be retested. However, according to UL, you have to change something in the design before you retest it. Manufacturers are going to want to get this right the first time because it is expensive to run these tests, so it behooves us to do so. One other thing to note is that you can actually test, as you will see in the picture we're about to see, horizontally installed assembly. And if it passes, then that wall can be installed vertically. However, if it's a vertical test and passes, you cannot install that wall horizontally. And Scott will talk more about this in just a few minutes. So here you go, a horizontally installed wall, and you can see that there's evidence that the seams have started busting. They're cracking, the tape and bed mud is cracking, and the heat and the smoke is lapping through and discoloring the side of the wall board. And so you can see that it's burning, and you can just about bet those thermocouples, 10, 3, and 8, have exceeded that 325 degrees. So this wall has definitely failed, and to retest it, they could retest it, but they would have to change something in the design. They obviously would not do a hose penetration test on this wall because we already know that it fails. So we talked about the floor assembly testing. This is a 14 by 18 test. You can see the crane on top goes down and picks this assembly up and then rolls it over to this big oven that we're getting ready to see. There you go. Actually in the floor. You can actually go down there and walk around in there. Obviously not when the flames are lit, but there's a guide on the right that is behind there. When that assembly is lowered and those flames are full force. So those thermocouples are measuring the heat for whatever 1 hour, 2 hour, 4 hour rating that you need. Sometimes it might be restrained or unrestrained. And sometimes they can even do a test on subway cars and train cars to see if they meet the standards that are being looked for. You'll see two different sometimes ratings referred to, fire ratings and finish ratings. We're only concerned about fire ratings, as you should be too, so that pertains to the whole assembly. Finish ratings are usually in regards to wood structures, and they're being tested primarily for the wood industry. Information that they're looking for doesn't really mean anything to you. So you're going to focus in on that 1 hour, 2 hour, or 4 hour UL rated assembly for fire ratings.
All right, so the books, as you can see, the date there is 2015. So they're obviously a little bit out of date, but it does not make them not valid. So that's why we wanted to make sure we showed you a little bit on how to use the website to get the most up-to-date stuff, up-to-date changes that may have been made. For instance, some manufacturers may have different screw patterns for their particular wall assemblies, how they were installed, and that may have been updated since 2015. So we have to go online and really download the most recent design to make sure that everything lines up with each other. 3 volumes, 4 books. Volume 3 covers dampers, fire doors, glazing materials. 2A and 2B cover joint systems, through penetration fire stop systems, electrical circuit protective systems, and then our duct assemblies. And then volume 1 is where we'll find the drywall. So that's beams, floors, walls, partitions, roofs, and columns. They're all found in our volume number 1. So that's where the first 10 pages are. And what we would like to do is just highlight a few things that are in there. Again, you need to go online when you have a few extra minutes and get to a UL design, click that link for the general information and start scrolling through to see what's there. There's a lot of stuff other than what we can cover today. So we're going to go through these 5 bullet points, 1 slide each, and you're going to look at this and go, wow, this looks pretty elementary. But the reason we picked these is because it's cost somebody out there an awful lot of money because they didn't do it right. So we want to make sure people are aware, just to give you an idea of things to look for. So first we'll go with nails versus screws. For those of us that do wood construction or install wood construction or design it, what UL says is that if the wood wall, the drywall was attached with nails, the contractor on their own can decide to use screws instead if they prefer. Maybe it's faster, I don't know. The owner can say, no, I don't want nails, I want you all to use screws on that. And the architect can do the same. So if it's tested with nails, you can use screws, but the screws have to be the same length as the nail with the same diameter head. If the test was done with screws, contractor or anybody else cannot substitute nails for those screws, okay? So the opposite is not true because we're gonna weaken the system. When wood gets hot, it dries out and it squeezes our nails out. That's what causes nail pops in our homes. So when you look up on your ceilings and you see this little disc coming out, it's nail pops. And it's because the wood's dried out over time. But think about that E119 fire test. That wood's drying out super fast. So if it pushes the nail out, it doesn't push the nail out so that there's a failure, then UL says, well, we know a screw is going to hold. So a screw is certainly acceptable. So bottom line, nails tested, you can do nails or screws. Screws tested, you can only install screws. Another basic one, but we see this more often than we would like. We have to read the design on how the boards were installed for the test. Frank mentioned this already about horizontal versus vertical installation of drywall. Vertically applied drywall is our long edge. That 8-foot or longer edge is running with our stud so that we're fastening it 8 inches or 12 inches on center right into the stud itself. That long edge is protected by a stud. Horizontally is obviously laid over on its side. We do that a lot in residential construction. We sell a 54-inch wide board with 2 layers of that. You get a 9-foot ceiling, and that's perfectly fine. But if it's a UL test was done vertically, and that's it, that's all, that's the way it was installed, contractor has to install it vertically. They cannot on their own lay it on its side and go horizontal. If it's tested horizontally and passes, you can install it horizontally or vertically. Horizontal is the harder way to pass. So if we pass it horizontally, then we know, UL says we know you're going to pass it vertically. So we'll give you that, okay? So bottom line, got to read the design and how it was installed. If it's vertically installed, it's got to be vertically installed. If it's vertically tested. If it's horizontally tested, it can go horizontal or vertical. Big topic nowadays is fire taping. Most, if not all, I'm going to go with most UL designs with drywall require a fire taping. Fire taping is a level 1 finish with an additional step to it. So the picture here shows a joint compound in our vertical joint that would also be in our horizontal joint you see there, and we would embed tape into that. That gives us a level 1 finish. What fire taping does is adds the step of making sure that there's no exposed fastener heads in the field of the board. So they'll just put a little dab of joint compound on each fastener head, and that meets the requirements for it. Doesn't have to be pretty. This is not going to be somewhere that people are going to see when the building's occupied. Multiple layered walls for 2-hour, 3, 4-hour walls where you've got multiple layers of drywall, we only fire tape the outside or the last installed layer on both sides, okay? That's it. We don't have to do every layer. It's important also to read how it was fire taped in the design. There are some designs out there that were actually done a level 2 finish, were done in order to pass the fire test. So that's something these little things that we don't think about on a daily basis, we really do need to read to make sure we're installing things the way they were tested at a minimum. Thickness is a minimum as well. So the thicker the drywall, the better it performs in fire. Now there's additives, and we're going to get into the Chord Type series. Frank will do that shortly. But for right now, let's just think about thickness. The more gypsum we have between 2 pieces of paper or 2 pieces of fiberglass mat, the more moisture we have in that drywall. So the more moisture, the better it is at retarding heat through it during that E119 fire test. So it just makes sense that UL says, hey, if you want to go thicker with your drywall, go for it. That's not a problem. You can add as many layers of drywall as you would like to any UL design. As a gypsum manufacturer, I encourage you all to do that all the time. I'm just kidding. But it's permissible to do because you're actually going to get more fire resistance by having more gypsum. And we're going to get into some of that core designation, type X and C in just a minute. So this is an interesting one too. We're showing here a ceiling roof type application for, and the picture shows insulation there. Let's assume just for a minute, okay, that there's no insulation. We passed the test without it. You all specified it, and that was installed. Building's occupied. 3 months down the road, the local airport decides they're diverting the way the airplanes fly in and out, and it's now coming right over your building. What's the best way to get more sound proof? Throw in some insulation up there. So UL says, if you have a tested design that was tested without insulation, and I'm talking about a floor ceiling or a floor roof design, you can add insulation to that, but, and there's a big but, capital B, capital U, capital T. If you do, you need to add an additional layer of a drywall to the ceiling. So whatever's there, we make it double layered. The reason for that is if I test without insulation and we light up a fire in that room, the wall for sure gets hot pretty quick, but the ceiling is going to get hot a lot faster. And as the board calcinates, right, we saw it turning to steam in the video, that steam is allowed to, you know, go up in those that attic space there and kind of dissipate. So it keeps the board cooler because that happens. But once I throw insulation on top of that, it's going to actually not allow that steam just to go right through. It's going to keep it in the board, which means the temperature gets higher quicker, and we could prematurely fail the test. So with these specific designs, we can add insulation if it wasn't tested, but we have to add an additional layer of drywall. Flipping this to partitions that were tested without insulation, you can add insulation to them all day long and you don't have to do anything different. Okay, so the wall's different. The wall is, go ahead, add the glass, faced or unfaced bat insulation to a wall. You get better STCs, obviously R value, so you can do that. Nothing additional needed to be done. But with these particular assemblies, you do need to add additional layer of drywall to the ceiling. Quick video to give you a visual of that.
The gypsum in the core of the board actually emits steam when exposed to fire and retards the transfer of heat through the panel.
So you see, if we threw insulation on top of that, I'm going to cook that board super fast, right? And you can put a lot up there as long as it fits. There is a limit, but you can put some significant amount of R value up there. I believe it's 40, so it's significant, but it's got to fit too. You can't cram stuff in there. And in fact, the GA600 has all of these notes too in its book as well. So, but you can see what would happen if we throw the insulation there. Oh, sorry. One of my favorite slides is this one. We see an awful lot in one picture here. To test for load-bearing fire ratings, we obviously have to apply load during the test. At the bottom of the picture there, you see 4 hydraulic jacks. They are very slowly, over the hour test, this particular test was for an hour, applying load to that wall assembly. What that gentleman's doing is he's actually measuring for deflection. There is a very taut wire going right through the middle of 4, 5, and 6, and he's measuring how much the board or the wall deflects as we apply pressure to it and it heats up. As long as it doesn't deflect past whatever the limit is during the 1 hour test, you get your, and everything else works as well. In other words, you don't hit an average of 250 degrees above room temperature and no hot spots, no burn throughs, those kinds of things. You get your load bearing fire test. The clock bottom left is 50 minutes, 39 seconds. So that's the last time he's actually going to take a measurement. After that, he's done. We just hope we make it all the way to the 60 minutes without any of our thermocouples going nuts on us. The other cool thing about this picture, and I think the coolest thing about this picture is what you don't see. He is standing 7 inches away from 1700 degrees, and he's not breaking a sweat. Now, he wouldn't sit down and have a picnic lunch up there. There is heat coming through. We've all walked to the bottom of those stairs, that little ladder, and had a conversation with him, and you feel the heat coming through for sure. But it's amazing how well our drywall systems and walls, and it really retard heat so that people can get out of a building. Stud sizes are minimums. Really good to know because you can always beef up a UL design, particularly with studs and spacing. So if it's 25 gauge metal and you would prefer to use 20 or 18 or anything stronger, you can do that. UL allows you to beef up the studs. If they're skinny studs and you want to go wider, you can do that. Just makes sense, right? The wider the wall, the better it's going to be at retarding heat through it. stud spacing is a maximum. So if it was tested 16 inches on center, that's the way it needs to be installed, or tighter. Can't go to 24. If you want 24, go find a test that was done 24 inches on center. So the ideal metal test would be 25 gauge studs, 24 inches on center, and then now we know we can beef up the studs and make them closer together with those designs. U465 is a great example of that we'll walk through in a minute. Parallel rows of studs, double studded walls is a minimum space between them. They can go as wide as you'd like for whatever the reason. It will not affect, it'll actually improve the fire rating a little bit, but it won't hurt it, put it that way. So you're not going to, they allow you to go wider, just can't go any closer together than what was tested.
So Scott mentioned a couple of times the fire resistant properties of gypsum, and let's take a look at that now. Gypsum is a mineral, it's quarried. They break it up and they transport it to factories where it is combined with a couple of other products so that it becomes 21% by weight chemically combined water, and that's calcium sulfate plus 2 parts of water. So if you took a normal piece of drywall, sheet of drywall, 5/8 inch, type X, for example, there would be 22 pounds of water. Does that mean you can just squeeze that piece of drywall and that water will come out? No, it's pretty in there, placed in there solidly. It will be released only when it's heated, and it will be released as steam. That's part of the calcinization process that we're going to talk about. So this makes it quite effective as a fire-resistant barrier. So usually, beginning use of gypsum, they would use it to protect wooden structural members from fire. As that board heats up, if you remember the video that looked like smoke, that was actually steam being released. That's part of the calcinization process. And so when you begin to look at getting a UL rated system, you have to take some extra steps that we're going to look at, because typically a piece of gypsum wall will only get you 30 to 45 minutes. So the temperature behind that point is only like boiling water. So that's what we're looking for as far as fire resistance. And to increase the fire resistance, you're increasing the amount of time that somebody can evacuate, can egress from that building safely. So I kind of gave you a preview of what I'm going to talk about next when you look at the different chord types. So the first one you have is regular, then type X, and then type C. So let's take a look at those. The regular is just a plain old piece of gypsum you would go to the store and get and put up in your house. It's got some fire resistance, but it's really only going to get you 30 to 45 minutes. If you want a UL rated system, you're going to have to, for 1 hour and 2 hours, you're going to have to take some extra steps. So that's when we get to move into products like type X that you will see in a UL rated fire assembly. So type X, during that slurry, when they have that gypsum board combined and it's into that slurry part, they're going to take fiberglass filaments and they're going to integrate it into that slurry, so that when that board comes out and it's got the paper wrapped around it and it's ready to be cut, if you broke it in half and you looked at it at the light, you would see these filaments exposed. So what does that do? Well, as that core begins to heat up and as that core begins to shrink, those fiberglass filaments are going to hold it together so that it will meet that UL 1 hour or 2 hour test. If you need something more robust for that, say for example, something that you would be using a ceiling assembly, you would go to the next product. And that is our type C. So you're going to take that same slurry that already has the fiberglass filaments in it, and now you're going to add a product like vermiculite or something that's very similar. What is the difference between the fiberglass filaments and the vermiculite? Well, the vermiculite explodes like popcorn, and it's going to fill the voids created as that steam escapes from that gypsum core and as that gypsum core begins to disintegrate. Again, you can use it in things like ceiling assemblies. So it's important to know, though, that if you've got regular type X coming to your job site and type C, that The boards, just in appearance, are going to look almost the same. So your people really need to know and read the labels to know which one is being used. So how can you, when you go on a job site, determine if the right board is being installed? So let's take a look at that. This is normally what you might see on a piece of drywall, but ultimately UL only calls for us to put the information that is boxed in red. So that's the UL logo with the classified for Canada or US, and it's going to give you information about the gypsum board itself and the size and the width. And then there's this little thing that says type FSW, chord type. So Scott's going to explain just a little bit more in a bit of what that means, but that will help you identify if they're installing the right gypsum that is going to meet your 2-hour assembly. To the far right, you'll see just information about where it was made, at what plant, the time, and the date.
All right, let's walk you through 3 assemblies, and then we're going to wrap things up with the most often questions we get that will kind of cover things we covered today. So let's look for a metal stud wall, gypsum board, 1-hour rating. We showed you, how to do that on the website. And what we're actually going to do, so where you find those would be a U, V, or W. The metal studs are in the 400 numbers. And then we're going to look at U465 in a little bit more detail. V438 is a 1 to 4 hour UL assembly. So the 1-hour version is the U465. So here, just to point out things to look for, the floor and ceiling runners are specified. So that's what at a minimum needs to be installed, right? Number 2, steel studs. The good news about the steel studs is they're 25 gauge metal with 24-inch on center spacing. So we can beef that wall up as strong as we want to make it. So you can go 20 gauge or anything stronger, and we can get those studs even closer together. So that's a great UL design to specify because we can always beef it up a little bit. Bats and blankets insulation is optional for this partition. It's not needed for the fire rating. And that's why you see in the picture it only goes halfway across. That is to indicate that with insulation, there is a corresponding STC rating for this particular design. We don't print it up on this particular slide because we're really focused on UL today, but there is an STC rating with insulation associated. If the insulation is drawn all the way across, left to right, right to left, the whole thing is filled in, it usually means it's required for the UL design. So number 3 in that case wouldn't be optional. It would specify what was tested and what's approved for that design. Gypsum board, number 4. So that's an awful lot of words for just 2 layers of drywall, right? One on either side of the studs. But what's important is that this is where all those core designations come into play, all those different types that we saw on the UL label. We saw 1 FSW. There's a lot of other ones too. And this is where we find what products are acceptable to be installed on this particular wall. For instance, I know I can do regular drywall because that's the way it was tested. Can I do impact resistant drywall? Or can I use the soundboard in this particular design? So that's what those codes tell us. The other thing it does is, this section does, is it tells us how it was fastened. So that not all manufacturers are identical in how things need to be fastened as far as gypsum to the studs. So the spacing may be a little bit different, 12 on 12 for certain manufacturers, where it's 8 foot on the perimeter and 12 foot in the field of the board for other manufacturers. So all of that comes into play. Bottom line, we got to read the details, particularly those of us that are installing and inspecting the stuff. So here's a chart for different codes and why do we need all these codes? UL says that, okay, for U465, which is the one we're looking at, what products do you want to be acceptable for that? And we have to test all these different products. So they give us a code for those products, and each one has got something different about it. Okay, so it's either a different thickness, or it's a different facer, paper versus mold resistant paper versus fiberglass mat. Maybe it has an additional scrim in it, fiberglass mat, to be used for the abuse boards. The sound boards, several of them on the marketplace now, they have polymers in them. So all of those things are going to perform differently in a fire, and UL says we want you to test that before we approve it. So that's why we have all of these codes. You'll never remember all this. Just remember where to find the information. That's the construction guides, the websites, and the reps for the manufacturers that can help you with this. Number 5 does specify the joint tape and compound. This is a level 1+ finish. Remember, we talked about level 1 finish, and then we also have to hit the fasteners in the field of the board as well. At a minimum, some designs may require a little bit more than that. So again, we've got to read. Resilience channels are an option. And then the steel framing members are specified too, just not shown in the picture. So that, just want to give you an overview. Little things here and there we've got to pay attention to make sure we install, order, install, load the job properly. So let's do this. Let's go with metal studs, same as before, gypsum board, and now a 2-hour rating. If you had the binder or the volume, the book, on your lap or your desk, you could just keep flipping pages from the 1 hour to the 2-hour section, and you'd find it. On the website, we would actually have to put the search criteria in for that. So it's still U, V, or W. It's still a 400 number. We'll find these. It's just further along in the manual. So we'll look at U411. That is the 2-hour version of the V438. And I really only have the one slide to show you this because we just want to point out the differences. The biggest difference is very visual. We've got 2 layers of drywall where we've offset the board joints on both sides of the wall, right? So that's number 1, and the joints do need to be offset. We don't ever want to put a 4x8 or 4x whatever piece of drywall up and put our second layer directly on top of it. We always want to offset our vertical joints there. The steel studs here are 2.5 inches wide, so a little bit thinner to hold, to keep our wall skinnier. But it's also 25 gauge metal, 24 inches on center spacing, so you can beef up these studs and you can beef up the spacing. So again, it's a great design for a 2-hour wall, and you can do things to make it bigger, better, and stronger. Last sentence of the slide: studs to be cut 3/4 inch less than the assembly height. That's new, right? We don't do that with 1 hour, but with the 2-hour, because of the long burn, things move, and we allow for deflection tracks there. Now, we don't manufacture deflection tracks. There's other folks that do that, but there's a lot of head of wall details because almost every building's different. I mean, it's not every building's different, but there's unique situations on so many different buildings with head of wall detailing and how do you do the fire stopping. Frank's going to go over a great resource for you at the end where a lot of that information can be found. All right, let's do one more with wood because there's probably several of us out there that work with wood, not just all metal. So we're going to look at a roof ceiling system and then gypsum wall board. So now we're in the P, G, or L series. We're at the 500 numbers, and we'll just go ahead and pick L558 to look at. So just this slide to show you, and if we did screenshots of the entire design, it would be screenshot after screenshot after screenshot. It's quite lengthy. But what it does, we'll go top to bottom. So we're looking at an unrestrained assembly rating for 1 hour. That is your fire rating. That's what we care about. Right below it, finish rating for 23 minutes, we do not care. With these particular types of assemblies, you will have either an unrestrained or a restrained assembly rating. That's your fire rating. Those two terms we get with our engineers and discuss which is better for our particular project, okay? That's what those cover. So number 1, floor system, there are 3 or 4 particular floor systems that were tested that are okay to use with this particular design. Trusses are specified as far as spacing and size. Air ducts and ceiling dampers, there are options there, but we'd have to obviously pick one of those options. And then so on and so forth. So you can just see. So you've got some options there. We can always beef this up, but we can't ever take anything away from it. So let's kind of start to close out things with the most often questions we get in our technical department that relate to fire. The first question is, what does it mean that I've achieved a 1 hour fire rating? Well, what it means is that we've passed the Astm E119 test for at least 60 minutes, and we passed the hose string test, right? So we had that second wall we burned, tried to hose it down, tried to make a hole in it. We did make a hole in it. We're good to go. We get our UL design. Do the exact studs specified in the UL design need to be used, right? Before I answer the question, real quick, some of us are in markets where we do area separation wall. Although the picture's not pretty, it's a success story for the area separation wall. We had a fire, obviously, in this particular building. The area separation wall is a self-supported metal stud system with 2 inches thick of drywall. So 2 layers of 1 inch thick shaft liner. The metal system is attached to the stick framing with aluminum clips, lots of them. As they get hot and melt and give way, the stick framing falls on itself, fire goes out. So it's a great a system to use to protect, obviously, adjacent units. We use this, lots of different parts of the country is using this system. So good system. Anyway, back to our studs. Remember, studs is a minimum unless it's otherwise stated in the design. So we got to read. So if the drywall was hung with screws, with nails, can you substitute those nails with screws? The answer is yes, absolutely can do that. As long as it's 1 for 1, same diameter, head, and length, and spacing. Opposite is not true. Tested with screws, it's installed with screws, okay? Can you add glass fiber insulation to any partition design when it wasn't tested in that particular design? Yeah, you can. You can put that faced or unfaced glass bat right in there. Do it for STCs, do it for R value, for sure. For the floor ceiling assemblies, the GLP 500 series assemblies, you can add insulation to those, but remember that capital B, capital U, capital T. But you've got to add an additional layer of drywall to the ceiling, or to the lid. What's the difference between regular and type X wallboard? Two big differences. The biggest is we add filaments of fiberglass to the core. Frank showed you that, and a picture of what that looks like. And if you remember the blow up of the drywall picture there, you could see it. And that blow up is only about a 1 or 2 times zoom. So you could actually see it with the naked eye when you score and snap type X drywall. So that's it. And then the minimum thickness of 5/8. So they're the two big differences. Number one question we get at our technical department: what is the fire rating of our 5/8 type X wallboard? Trick question. There is no fire rating for any product. It's all the parts and pieces that were tested, the various manufacturers together, and what's listed in the UL design that gives you your fire rating.
All right. That concludes our official AIA presentation. We want to give you just kind of an overview of National Gypsum and what products and resources that we have available for you. And I know Thad's been answering questions, so as you continue we go along, go ahead and ask your questions. And again, if we can't get to them during this presentation, they will be answered offline. So when you look at our products, Gold Bond, Permabase, Dexcel, and Proform, let's take a quick look at those. The Gold Bond is our gypsum board products. It's not your daddy's foot powder. All right, so, but most of all, what you need to know about National Gypsum is that we are committed to sustainability and transparency. And so a lot of our products have the UL Green Guard Gold certification, which used to be Green Guard for schools. We've also issued declare labels on a lot of our products. We have multiple HPDs in our system for our products, and we participate in programs like Living Building Challenge, LEED version 4, Living Building, Green Globes, IGCC, and so on. We have people dedicated in Charlotte that can help you navigate getting the correct LEED documents that you need for any of our products that are used. We do that for our dealers and our salesmen all the time, and we ourselves use that source as well. So when you're looking at paper face products, you have your typical gypsum board products that you see that are kind of off-white. But when you begin to look at products like mold and mildew resistance, we have our color is purple. That's our trademark color. That means it has the mold and mildew resistance. It's our extra protection family of products. You can get it in shaft liner. Now all of these are interior products: shaft liner, wallboard, and then we have it in abuse or impact resistance. We have our sound break, which has 2 layers of gypsum with a viscoelastic polymer in the middle to act as a sound dampening to increase STC in your wall assemblies. And of course, we have our own mud products that we'll talk about in just a bit as well. The EXPs, we wanted to make things not too easy for you guys, those products are also purple. The big difference is with EXP, that's extended exposure, and it has a fiberglass mat. So if you were to take a piece of XP and a piece of EXP side by side, you would be able to detect the fiberglass textures in the EXP. And what that does is the fiberglass mat products get you a score of 10 on the mold test. So no mold will grow. Get you 12 months exposure and can get you a 12-month product warranty on that as well. So exposure warranty. So that's important. So that comes in the exterior sheathing, shaft liner, and tile backer, which yes, it's an interior product, but because it's in a damp area, you need that fiberglass face mat to help protect it. And then the last picture on your right is very important if you're working on a building and it hasn't been topped out, hasn't been enclosed, isn't conditioned. You don't want to use just regular paper-based products in there because that will not necessarily conform to ASTM C840, which lays out the interior conditions that are needed. So you need a fiberglass face product in there if your people got to have hang drywall so that they can do MEP work. Now, once the building gets closed, you can install the rest of the drywall and do your finish out of that. So it's important to note that if your building hadn't been closed and it's not conditioned, you need to use a fiberglass face gypsum. We can talk to you more about that later. These are our mud products, and their difference primarily is one's pre-mixed and one is dry. The one on the right has a chemical curing system. The one on the left is dries by evaporation. So if you've got the conditions with the humidity and temperature that it's going to take longer to recoat that product that you're using on the left, then you may want to think to use the quick set, which has other uses as well, but it can speed up the time that you need. The Dust Tech on the bottom right is a special product that as you sand it, that dust falls to the ground instead of being released into the environment to get into your duct systems. Permabase is our cement board. We use it a lot on the interior and wet areas, but you can also use it exterior as part of EIFS systems. It can be used behind thin brick and EIFS systems. It's incorporated into a lot of EIFS manufacturers' warranties. It has the fiberglass mesh cementitious core, a rounded edge that allows you to put the fastener in as close to the edge as possible. We've introduced recently our Permabase CI that gets you an R10. It's continuous insulation as part of the system, saves you time. Going around the building, it's already attached to a piece of cement board. Green Guard Gold as well. Well, the most important thing that we'd like to mention to you are resources. So if you go to our National Gypsum website in the Design Center, which I'll show you in just a minute, you can download one of the two books that I'm getting ready to show you. The first one is the purple book that has a lot of the UL designs that our construction technical department deals with every day. This is the second volume, so it's got new systems in there, wall and ceilings, details for steel stud partitions, shaft wall assemblies, even repair details. So the good thing about it, if you download this book and you look at an assembly and it has a UL number, you can hyperlink right to UL. And then you have the legends that shows you sometimes the head of wall or the wall priority or intersections, transitions. So all of this is very important and very critical that helps you get the information that you need, and it is downloaded as well. But you can also get these books in hard copies too if you'd like to have them on your shelf. The sound book, we talked about our product Soundbreak. Soundbook 2.0 is new. Gives you 35 to 45 new assemblies that are going to help increase your STCs, wall assemblies, ceiling assemblies and retrofit assemblies as well. And this is using, and these assemblies a lot of time are Soundbreak with this elastic polymer to increase, help increase the STCs in your room. Gives you some great details on how you can accomplish that with great steel stud or wood stud. And sometimes you can achieve it by just increasing the number of sheets of drywall or insulation as well. And here's an example of that. It gives you the testing criteria where the big green purple area is in STC 55, and this one shows you that it's a combination of regular drywall, and then our sound break gives you the UL design E465. Ours is V438 and 1 hour. And if you remember, and that Scott was talking about the core, so this is saying that the sound break meets that E465 test with its specific core number. We are dedicated to keeping our specifications as updated as possible. So not only do we have our own 3-part formatted specifications that can be dropped into your specifications, we work with product master spec as well as spec link to make sure they have the most updated information to keep you on track to generating good specifications for your gypsum board systems or your exterior sheathing. Again, the National Gypsum website, on the main page, you can get to specifications, to additional continuing education courses. The right where the red is, that gives you all the product information you need to. When you scroll down, you'll get to the information about connecting it to the design center. This is where we can help you with any lead information that you want. You can see where the HPDs are, and then it also has a section that allows you to download the CAD designs on sound and fire as well. So our crew of construction design managers are otherwise known as architecture reps. So on the West Coast, we have Pat, and then when you go to the right at the top, you have Thad Goodman, who covers the Midwest, and then Scott, who is on this call with me, Northeast, and Alan down in Florida and Georgia and those areas, Louisiana, those areas that have been hit by the hurricanes. I want to remember those people as they go through trying to clean up and recover from that. Train Schwartz is our architectural specialist that can help you with information on lead projects, generating the lead documents that you need. She does this with our salesmen and dealers and with us. And then Amy Hockett is our leader, and she is in the background today making sure that everything is working like it should. The most important number, if you don't get anything else out of this presentation, is 1-800-NATIONAL. When you call this number, you're going to speak to one of these guys, Mark Chapman, Jim Farrell in the middle, or Sam Halverson, who's sitting down. Sam is an architect as well. Jim came from the contracting side, and Mark Chapman, engineering background. These guys have all the knowledge and experience you need to have any questions about UL-rated assemblies, acoustical assemblies, drywall problems. They can help you. And the best thing is that when you call 1-800-NATIONAL, you get to talk to one of them directly, or if you have to leave a message, they will get right back to you. You don't have to punch 3 or 4 different buttons to get to where you want to go. 1-800-NATIONAL. So we want to thank you for being with us, being patient today, and we hope that you got a lot out of this presentation. And again, if there's any questions that have not been answered, we will make sure we get those answers to you. So on behalf of Scott Hughes and myself and Thad Goodman and our home team, we'd like to thank you for being on this presentation today.